The morning sun streamed through the large glass windows of the diner, painting golden streaks across the tiled floor. The clinking of coffee cups and the gentle hum of conversations filled the air, a comforting backdrop to the morning rush. Jada, a seasoned waitress with a warm smile and quick hands, moved effortlessly between tables, her tray balanced with precision. She greeted each customer with the same genuine cheer, even though her double shift had already begun to weigh on her feet. As she reached a table near the counter, the soft jingle of the diner's doorbell broke through the usual noise. At first, Jada didn't look up. Her hands were busy serving a plate of pancakes, her mind already calculating the next order to deliver. But a sudden hush fell over the room, silencing even the chatter of the regulars. It wasn't the usual pause for a late breakfast crowd. This was different, curious, almost reverent. Jada glanced up, her tray still in her hands. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she stood frozen. There he was, Clint Eastwood. The Clint Eastwood. His tall, lean frame entered the diner with an unassuming air, a well-worn cowboy hat shadowing his iconic face. Sunglasses hid his eyes, but his quiet charisma filled the room, commanding attention without a single word. Jada's heart skipped a beat. She had grown up watching his movies with her late father, who always admired Eastwood's rugged determination and quiet strength. Memories of Sunday afternoons spent on their worn-out couch flashed through her mind. Her father would nod approvingly at the screen, saying, "Now that's a man who knows how to make an impact." And now, here he was, standing in her diner, larger than life yet so understated it seemed unreal. Clint scanned the room briefly, his movements deliberate, before making his way to a booth in her section. As he sat down, the whispers among the diners grew louder. Jada could hear snippets. "Is that really him? No way, it can't be. It's Clint Eastwood, I swear." She forced herself to breathe, gripping her tray tightly. "He's just another customer," she reminded herself, though her pounding heart disagreed. Gathering her composure, she approached his table. With a deep breath, she managed a professional smile. "Good morning, sir," she said, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. "What can I get you today?" Clint looked up, his sunglasses reflecting her image back at her. Then he smiled, a simple, genuine expression that immediately put her at ease. "Just a black coffee and whatever breakfast you recommend," he replied, his voice low and gravelly but warm. Jada nodded, jotting down his order. "Coming right up." As she walked back to the counter, her mind raced. Clint Eastwood, here in my section, talking to me like it's the most normal thing in the world. Behind her, the hum of the diner began to rise again, but Jada's world remained focused on the unexpected guest sitting quietly in booth 5. Something about this moment felt different, as though it was the beginning of something she couldn't yet understand. Jada approached Clint's table with his steaming black coffee and the breakfast special, a plate of fluffy scrambled eggs, crisp bacon, and golden toast. Her usual ease with customers faltered slightly as she placed the plate in front of him, her hands trembling just enough for her to notice. Clint looked up from under the brim of his hat, offering her a polite, almost fatherly smile. "Thank you," he said, his voice gravelly yet warm. The sincerity in his tone caught her off guard. It wasn't the hollow courtesy she often heard from hurried customers. It felt genuine. "You're welcome," Jada replied, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. She lingered for a moment, unsure if she should say more, but Clint's eyes, kind and patient, invited her to continue. "Enjoy your meal," she added quickly, retreating to the counter before she said something she might regret. But as the minutes passed, she couldn't help but glance at his table. Each time she noticed how deliberate he was with his movements, savoring the food, looking out the window, and occasionally glancing around the diner. It was as if he truly appreciated the moment. When Clint motioned for a coffee refill, Jada took the pot and returned to his table. As she poured, he looked up. "Busy morning?" he asked, his tone casual but curious. She nodded, setting the pot down. "Always is," she said with a soft laugh. "Especially when you're working a double shift." Clint raised an eyebrow. "A double shift? That's no small feat." Jada smiled faintly, her exhaustion evident despite her professionalism. "It's part of the job. Gotta do what you gotta do." Clint leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. "What keeps you going?" he asked, his question simple yet profound. Jada hesitated, the weight of her reality pressing down on her. "My son," she said finally, her voice softening. "He's the reason I do all of this. I want to give him the kind of life I never had." Clint nodded, his respect for her apparent. "That's a powerful reason," he said. "But what about you? What keeps your spirit alive?" The question caught her off guard, and for a moment she didn't know how to answer. "I used to dream about acting," she admitted quietly, almost as if she were confessing a secret. "When I was younger, I wanted to be on stage or in movies. But life has a way of steering you in different directions." Clint's gaze didn't waver. "Have you ever thought about pursuing it again?" Jada laughed softly, though the sound was tinged with sadness. "Dreams don't pay the bills, Mr. Eastwood," she said, her smile forced. "And honestly, I don't even know if I'd be any good at it now." Clint leaned forward slightly, his expression serious yet encouraging. "Sometimes," he said, "the hardest part of chasing a dream is believing it's still worth chasing. But you'd be surprised what you can do when you give yourself a chance." Jada felt a lump rise in her throat at his words, her eyes stinging with unshed tears. For the first time in years, someone had looked past the surface of her life and seen the person she once dreamed of being. Jada watched Clint Eastwood from the corner of her eye as he finished his meal. Unlike most customers who hurried through their food while scrolling on their phones or rushing to their next appointment, Clint seemed fully present. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, his gaze occasionally drifting to the window, as if taking in the rhythm of the world outside. There was a stillness about him, a quiet energy that seemed to calm not just Jada, but the entire diner. The usual clattering of utensils and bustling conversations softened, as though everyone instinctively respected the man's presence. Even the other waitstaff whispered among themselves, pointing discreetly toward Clint's table. When Jada finally returned to check on him, he looked up with a kind smile. "Thank you, young lady," he said warmly. "The meal was excellent, and your service was even better." Jada felt her cheeks flush, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "I'm glad you enjoyed it, sir," she replied, her voice tinged with pride. Clint reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet, extracting a crisp $100 bill. He handed it to her without hesitation. "For you," he said simply, holding her gaze. Jada's eyes widened as she instinctively shook her head. "Oh no, sir, that's way too much. I can't." Clint raised a hand to stop her protest, his smile deepening. "You can, and you will," he said, his tone gentle but firm. "Sometimes it's nice to remind people how much they're appreciated, and today you've made my day better. Let me do the same for you." Her hand trembled slightly as she accepted the bill, her throat tightening with emotion. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Clint gave her a small nod and slid his coffee cup toward the center of the table, signaling he was ready to leave. As Jada picked up the plate and cup, she noticed something tucked underneath, a folded piece of paper. Her brow furrowed in curiosity, but she didn't open it right away. Instead, she cleared the table and carried the dishes to the counter, her mind racing. What could it be, she wondered, the weight of the folded note in her pocket growing heavier with every passing second. Was it a simple thank you? A kind gesture? Or perhaps a signature from the man whose movies she had watched countless times with her father? As Clint rose from the booth, he adjusted his hat and gave her one last look. "Take care of yourself, Jada," he said. The sound of her name on his lips caught her off guard. But before she could ask how he knew it, he was already heading toward the door, his steps unhurried, his presence leaving the room quieter than before. Jada stood frozen for a moment, clutching the note in her pocket. Her heart thudded in her chest, anticipation and a strange sense of reverence filling her. As the diner door closed behind him, she knew that whatever was in that folded paper was about to change everything. Jada stood behind the counter, the folded note feeling heavier in her hands than it should have. The diner bustled around her, but the world seemed to narrow into this one fragile moment. She wiped her palms on her apron and slowly opened the paper, her fingers trembling, as though they understood that what she was about to read could change her life. At first glance, the handwriting was neat and deliberate, each stroke carrying a quiet confidence. She expected a polite thank you or maybe an autograph, but what she saw made her heart skip a beat. The first line read, "Jada, dreams are the seeds of the future. Never let life stop you from planting them." Her breath hitched and she blinked rapidly, her vision blurring as the weight of those words settled over her. She gripped the counter for support, her knees feeling weak. Her mind raced, replaying the brief conversation she'd had with Clint about her dreams of acting, the dreams she had buried under the weight of responsibility and self-doubt. She continued reading, her eyes scanning each word as if they held a secret meant only for her. I know what it's like to feel like life has other plans. When I was starting out, there were countless moments when I wanted to quit. The odds felt impossible, and the world seemed determined to push me down. But I kept going, one step at a time, even when I couldn't see where the road would lead. Jada felt a tear slip down her cheek. The thought of Clint Eastwood, the larger-than-life icon, struggling to believe in himself felt almost unreal. And yet his words rang true, genuine in a way that reached the deepest corners of her heart. The note continued, "You've got something special, Jada. I saw it in the way you work, the way you carry yourself, and the light in your eyes when you talked about your son and your dreams. Don't let that light dim." Her hands shook as she brought the note closer, her tears now flowing freely. The weight of his words was almost overwhelming, but they didn't feel like a burden. Instead, they felt like a hand reaching out to her, pulling her out of the fog she had been living in for years. The final lines made her gasp. "If you're ever ready to take that leap, reach out to me. My team can help you take the first step. I believe in you." Below the message was his contact information, written plainly and without flourish. Jada's breath caught in her throat as the reality of his gesture sank in. Clint Eastwood, a man she had admired her entire life, had not only seen her, but had believed in her enough to offer her an opportunity. She clutched the note to her chest, her tears falling silently onto the counter. It wasn't just the words that moved her. It was the hope they carried. The hope that maybe, just maybe, her dreams weren't as impossible as she had thought. In that moment, the diner around her faded into the background. All that remained was a single piece of paper and a renewed belief in herself that she hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, Jada allowed herself to dream. Jada stood behind the counter, the folded note still pressed to her chest as tears blurred her vision. Her co-workers noticed her unusual stillness, and one of them, Maria, approached with a concerned look. "Jada, are you okay?" she asked gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. Jada wiped her tears quickly, trying to compose herself, but the emotions were too strong. "I'm fine," she said, her voice cracking. She hesitated, then unfolded the note and handed it to Maria. "Here, read this." Maria took the note carefully, her eyes scanning the words. As she read, her expression softened, and soon her own tears welled up. "Oh, Jada," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "This is incredible. He really sees you. He believes in you." The other staff noticed the exchange and began gathering around. "What's going on?" one of them asked. Maria, still holding the note, read it aloud. The diner fell silent as Clint's heartfelt words filled the air. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. This is amazing," said Tom, the diner's cook, his usually gruff voice softened. "He didn't just leave a tip, he left hope. That's rare." Jada nodded, her tears starting again. "I can't believe it," she said, her voice trembling. "I've worked here for years, and no one's ever seen me like that. It's like he looked right into my soul." The customers nearby, curious about the sudden quiet, began asking questions. "What's going on?" an older woman at the counter asked. Maria held up the note. "Clint Eastwood just left this for Jada," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You have to read it." As the note was passed around, the reactions were the same. Tears, smiles, and expressions of awe. "This is the kind of thing you read about in books," one customer said. "It's like something out of a movie." A regular customer named Pete, a retired teacher who always brought a notebook to jot down ideas, spoke up. "Jada, you need to share this story," he said, his tone encouraging. "The world needs to hear it. Imagine how many people this could inspire." Jada hesitated. "I don't know," she said. "I'm not used to putting myself out there like that." Pete smiled kindly. "Think of how his words made you feel," he said. "Now imagine how many others might need that same hope." After a long pause, Jada nodded. With Pete's help, She took a picture of the note and posted it on her social media with a simple caption. Today, a legend reminded me to dream again. Thank you, Clint Eastwood. Within hours, the post began to spread. Comments flooded in, with people sharing their own struggles, dreams, and moments of inspiration. This brought me to tears. What an incredible gesture. I needed this reminder today. Thank you for sharing. Clint Eastwood just became even more legendary in my eyes. As Jada read through the comments, a warmth filled her chest. Clint's kindness had not only changed her day, it had sparked a wave of hope that was reaching people far beyond the walls of the diner. For the first time in years, Jada felt seen, heard, and truly alive. Jada sat quietly at the counter, her mind still reeling from the overwhelming emotions Clint Eastwood's note had stirred. The folded piece of paper felt like a key to a door she hadn't dared to open in years. Around her, the diner hummed softly, but her co-workers and regular customers couldn't take their eyes off her. They sensed something extraordinary had just happened. Maria leaned over, her voice low and filled with curiosity. Are you going to tell us what's in the note, or do we all have to keep guessing? Jada hesitated, biting her lip. She wasn't sure if she was ready to share something so deeply personal, but then she remembered Clint's words. You've got something special. With a trembling hand, she unfolded the note again and handed it to Maria. Here, she whispered. Just read it. Maria scanned the words, her expression softening with every line. By the time she finished, tears glistened in her eyes. Oh, Jada, she said, her voice barely audible. This is, it's beautiful. He believes in you. The other staff began to gather, their curiosity piqued. What's going on? Tom, the diner's cook, asked, leaning against the counter. Maria read the note aloud, her voice breaking slightly as she repeated Clint's heartfelt words. The room grew silent as the powerful message hung in the air. When Maria finished, everyone looked at Jada with a mix of awe and admiration. Wow, Tom said, shaking his head. He didn't just leave a tip, he left you a future. Jada felt tears welling up again, but this time they weren't just tears of gratitude. They were tears of realization. For so long, she had convinced herself that her dreams didn't matter, that they were frivolous luxuries she couldn't afford. But now, a man she had admired her entire life had reminded her that those dreams were worth pursuing. Do you know what this means? Pete, a regular customer and retired teacher, asked. This isn't just about you, Jada. This is about everyone who's ever felt stuck, everyone who's ever needed someone to believe in them. Pete's words hit her hard, and she nodded slowly. But what do I do with it? She asked, her voice trembling. I don't even know where to start. Pete smiled warmly. Start by sharing it. Let the world see what he saw in you. Trust me, people need to hear this. Encouraged by Pete and Maria, Jada pulled out her phone and snapped a picture of the note. With trembling fingers, she typed a caption. Today, a legend reminded me to dream again. Thank you, Clint Eastwood. She hesitated for a moment before hitting post, but when she did, it felt like a weight had lifted off her shoulders. Within minutes, the post began gaining traction. Likes and comments poured in, each one echoing the sentiment Clint's note had sparked in her. This is so inspiring. I needed this reminder today. Clint Eastwood is a legend, not just for his movies, but for moments like this. Thank you for sharing, Jada. You've reminded me to look at my own dreams again. Jada read the comments with a mixture of disbelief and hope. Clint's kindness had set off a ripple effect, reaching people far beyond the diner. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Jada felt the stirrings of something she thought she had lost forever: faith in herself. Months had passed since Jada's encounter with Clint Eastwood, but the memory of that day remained vivid in her mind. The note he left had sparked a fire in her, a quiet but steady determination to reconnect with the dreams she had long buried. Encouraged by the overwhelming response to her viral post, Jada had taken her first steps toward acting. She enrolled in evening classes at a local theater, balancing her work at the diner with the pursuit of her passion. One afternoon, as she rehearsed a monologue in her small apartment, her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, and for a moment, she hesitated to answer. Finally, curiosity got the better of her. Hello? She said, her voice tentative. Hi, is this Jada? The voice on the other end was calm and professional. "This is Rachel, Mr. Clint Eastwood's assistant." Jada's breath caught in her throat. Yes, this is Jada," she stammered, her heart racing. "Mr. Eastwood came across your post about the note he left you," Rachel continued. "He was deeply moved by the story and wanted me to reach out. He's currently directing a film and would like to invite you to visit the set. He'd love to hear about your journey so far." The words hit Jada like a bolt of lightning. She struggled to find her voice. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Are you serious?" Rachel chuckled lightly. "Very serious. Are you available next week? We'd like to fly you out." Jada's hands trembled as she agreed, the surreal nature of the moment sinking in. After hanging up, she sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. Clint hadn't just inspired her. He had remembered her. The following week, Jada found herself standing on the edge of a bustling film set, the sheer scale of it leaving her in awe. The air buzzed with activity, actors rehearsing lines, crew members adjusting lights, and the hum of cameras capturing it all. Yet amid the chaos, there was an unmistakable calm as Clint Eastwood walked toward her, his presence as commanding as she remembered. "Jada," he said warmly, extending a hand. "It's good to see you again." Jada shook his hand, her nerves melting under his kind gaze. "Thank you for inviting me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe this is real." Clint smiled, his signature calm reassuring her. "I've been keeping up with your journey," he said. "You're proving what I already knew. You have what it takes." Her cheeks flushed with gratitude, and for a moment she couldn't speak. "You gave me the courage to try," she finally managed. "I'll never forget what you did for me." Clint nodded, his eyes twinkling with a quiet pride. "I've got one more thing for you," he said. "There's a small role in this film. It's not much, but it's a start. If you're willing to take the leap, it's yours." Jada's hands flew to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "A million times, yes." As she stepped onto the set for the first time, she reached into her pocket and touched the angel pin Clint had given her months ago. The memory of that day in the diner flooded her mind, and she whispered to herself, "Dreams really can come true." This story reminds us all that even the smallest acts of kindness can spark life-changing moments. Clint Eastwood's gesture didn't just leave a note. It left a legacy of hope, courage, and inspiration. If there's a dream you've been holding back on, take this as your sign to start. No matter how small the steps may seem, every journey begins with the decision to try. And remember, kindness and encouragement have the power to change lives, not just for the person you help, but for everyone who witnesses it. So, what's your next step? Whether it's reaching out to someone in need, sharing words of encouragement, or daring to chase your own dream, let today be the day you take action. Share your stories of kindness or courage in the comments below, and let's keep the ripple effect going. Together, we can inspire one another to believe in what's possible.